question. And you did not do your own homework and your own due diligence and check out what they say.
And something else, too. You have to understand this, folks. Our mainline truthers a lot of times say, well, Alex Jones didn't run with that story, so he must be a CIA plant. No. He's been warned. I've been warned in a call that could have only come from the dark side. I won't bore you with the details, and that happened 3 years ago, and I've never quite been the same since. But I will tell you, dead seriously, there are a lot of people in this truth chorus. And I will tell you that the bigger you get, the more danger you're in. Ross Perot had to give up after he was warned. So I'm going to mention this much. Everybody's pushing everything as hard as they can, but there are certain things that the mainline truthers have been warned off of. For instance, did you know the post office has, the U.S. Postal Service, the Postal Service, the private corporation, has the computer power, and according to a number of reports I've gotten, they can and do trace every single shipment, and they know everything that arrived at your home and where it came from. So you see, there are so many things which we can deal with on the local area. We can deal with the fact that, for instance, from now on, I'm going to refer to the FBI Corporation, the FDA Corporation. Let's just start realizing this, and once you see it, you'll realize there's nothing wrong with ignoring racketeering corporations. But there are certain things which I believe God Almighty has left to us on the local level. So take advantage of them. Wake up your neighbors. Deatra went shopping, and she asked a dozen or so merchants, did you know the IRS is a private corporation? She said, no. Well, maybe we should get together and talk about this. So that's what the county project is all about. That's what relocalization is all about. Get to know people, because you'll find out they're a lot nicer than you thought. These jerks have pitted us against each other based on our gender, our age, whether we were urban or rural, race,
our color,
who we vote for. But you understand, most people are real nice.
You know, if you don't think that people of other countries and of other faiths want the same things you want, they want peace, prosperity, education for their children, enough food on the table, and a roof over their head. They're no different than you are. Just because they may worship God by a different name or in a different way, it doesn't mean that their basic lives, their everyday goals for their families and their children are any different than yours.
Now, Terry, I have to say this. You know I'm a committed Christian, but I have less patience with anybody who calls themselves a Christian, says to turn a rock into a parking lot, than anybody who's a Muslim. I'm sorry. Live your faith.
No. You know, and I've seen this so much here lately, so much hate, which they create on purpose. That's what they want to see. You know, Americans vilifying Muslims or
anyone
Jews or anyone else, and they're so ignorant that they'll even lump in things like Buddhists and call that a religion.
Or atheists. What's wrong with an atheist? Unless they kill somebody, hurt somebody.
An atheist is simply a person who is not convinced of any particular faith or that God exists. Everybody understand, spirituality is a deeply, deeply individual and personal thing. Your communication with your Creator, or non-communication, as the case may be, is personal. It is internal. And no one can know but you what that is. And no one has the right to judge you for it.
It's real simple, folks. If you look into common law, it's common sense. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote a book called Common Law, and I got partway through and then got wrapped up in something else. But a lot of the complex stuff which you got in school about so-called history and so-called economics is ridiculous. Understand that homeschooling is the way our country was built. It was built with good textbooks and not necessarily the best trained teachers in the whole world. Get ready to homeschool, because we may not have bricks and mortar schools before this is all over. Understand that it'll be back to basics. It'll be food, clothing, shelter, getting along with your neighbors. That's where we're going. Now, the simple truth of the matter is this. Truth is simple. And if I've ever said anything intellectual, I apologize profusely, because everything I've tried to say is simple because it is simple. When you learn the simple truth about all these things we've been talking about, you'll understand that your job is to seek the simple truth, and it'll be easy to learn, and you will see what's going on, and you won't panic because it's going to be back to basics for a lot of things.
Well, did you know, for instance, what the original mission statement was for the first public schools?
No.
Back in colonial times, the mission statement of the public school was to teach the children to read so that they could read their Bible.
Okay, I've heard that. I didn't know that was the first, though.
And that did not change until 1965, when the U.S. government took over the Department of Education. And at that time, the mission statement changed for its purpose was to create responsible voters.
Bingo.
That should have been the biggest red flag this country's ever seen, and no one paid any attention.
Well, the thing which amazes me when I look back is my parents went nuts. I never heard my dad cuss until I got into my 8th grade history book. I never heard him cuss out loud. And they cussed for a week. And then a couple years later, there's a lady who had a PhD in education when it was rare. One of my mother's girlhood friends, she was my Aunt Eloise, although we weren't related. And I had never heard Aunt Eloise cuss. Never seen her kick anything, stomp, or yell until she got every darn new history book which was available on the market. And she and my mother were sitting there. My mother was a history geek. I grew up in a small library, okay? But they were sitting there jamming pieces of paper into all these books about all these different subjects, and they all told the same lies. And I got another one for you. They told me about all these things, the private Federal Reserve, the corporate nature of our government, the fact they're really corporations, and about this, that, and the other. And in 1969, 2 weeks before school was out, I got a letter from Purdue, free ride, scholarship, journalism, what I loved, what I most wanted to do. So I'm zinging off the walls. I go down to the local newspaper. You old guys who've listened to this stuff from me, all bored again. But I went down and I told the guys, hey, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get an education. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to come work with you. And some guy slammed something down on his desk. The sports writers are big guys. They're football players. I'm a little bitty feller. And I jumped out of my skin. He showed me a picture of the back of a mechanical voting machine. My dad found a patent for it later, 1906. And a letter of explanation how it could be rigged. And then what happened was that this newspaper went to verify to get pictures. The Kanawha County wouldn't let them look in the back of a voting machine. The kicker was the Kanawha County wouldn't let it, and the real kicker was the people upstairs who owned the newspaper. They had a liberal and a conservative one in Charleston. They wouldn't run with the story. Now, in 1 hour, within an hour, 2 more bubbles got busted, the integrity of our voting and our local media. I was so upset, and the next day my mother said, well, you did know, didn't you, that the town criers of old, before there was press or electronics, they were controlled by the king and the wealthy merchants? No, I didn't know. It's something she told me and I hadn't paid attention to. But that's the truth of the matter. You have to seek the truth, and it's usually very simple. And now Terry's real good at distilling truth, and I have to hand it to her. She has a way of saying it which makes so much sense.
Well, I've recently decided that one of the most often heard terms, and one that I've written a number of articles on based on it, is really an oxymoron, and that is the term common sense, because it is no longer common, and it is, in fact, becoming rare.
Well, I've watched an awful lot of people go through an awful lot of changes. I've seen them, I'll try to do this, I'll try to do that. We need more teachers. So all of a sudden there's a glut of teachers and people trying desperately to make a living. But what it boils down to, and these, I'll give you some basic economics my parents learned, born in 1912, by the time they were out of grade school. And this is what it boils down to. Wealth is grown out of or dug out of the ground. That's where it starts. You take something of little or no value, increases value as a result of your work, endeavor, Adam Smith's words. And also value is determined what a willing seller and a willing buyer are willing to pay for something at a particular time. I use the example that umbrellas are more expensive on rainy days. But basically, that is what this is all about. Now, if there was a king somewhere or another who would guarantee everybody's, what constitutional rights, that would be wonderful. If there was an oligarchy who do it, that would be wonderful. But the only way we've ever been able to guarantee rights is with a republic, not a democracy, where everybody has a certain degree of protection.
Well, you
That
just
is
said
how we started
something.
out.
You just said something, Jim, that is at the heart of one of the reasons we don't understand as Americans who we are and who we're supposed to be. You said constitutional rights.
Right.
We have no rights given to us by Constitution. Only rights we have are inalienable rights that we are born with. Governments do not give rights. They grant privileges. Man cannot take away those rights which your Creator has given you at birth.
The rights to game of groundhog.
And I'm going to do a show on that next week.
Good.
We need to understand what is the difference between a government-granted privilege and an inalienable right. And we need to understand that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Rights is not a list of what our rights are. It's a list of things that government cannot do to stomp on our rights.
Exactly. Hey, Terry, we have a caller on the line. Caller Kelly, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you are open, hon. Go ahead. We've only got about 8 minutes left.
Okay, I was calling to see what you see with my love life.
Oh.
Huh?
No, Kelly wants to be fun. Okay. Anyways, alrighty. Terry, go ahead and continue with what you were saying about what you're bringing to the table next Sunday.
It'll be an in-depth discussion on the founding of this country, what unalienable rights are, the words of the founding documents that really do pertain to the people, and that which doesn't, how to tell the difference, and more importantly, once you understand what your unalienable rights are, what that means, and what it means to be part of a constitutional republic, then you need to know how all of it has been taken and stripped from you. If you do not understand how they took it, by what manner and vehicle was used to take your freedoms from you, how can you possibly know how to stop it from happening again?
Can I give you a cutie? We have a groundhog family who lives on our little plot of land here. And the groundhog family raises their own kids, and if somebody from the government tries to yank that kid out and take it to government groundhog school, they won't have much of a hand left. They can sit there and dig their hole into the ground, and I don't see a building permit. They get to travel without a license. They get to eat whatever they eat without having to pay anybody for the right to work. So the bottom line is, we're talking about the rights God gave a groundhog, for crying out loud.
Exactly. All God's creatures, great and small, were born with the same inbred rights at birth, not privileges. Privileges are something you aspire to, something you earn, hopefully. And goods and services are not rights.
And the right to travel and the right to defend yourself, for crying out loud, are rights, and men need tools. I cannot outrun a pack of wolves without some kind of a tool to fend them off. I cannot climb a tree faster than a mountain lion. So the simple truth is that we need our property.
A great nation of entitlement mentality. Guess what, folks? You are not entitled to a living, to food, to housing, to a job, to energy, to a car, just because your mama thought you were cute and you're breathing.
These are the things the groundhog has to go out and do for himself. He has to eat. He has to do whatever he has to do. So we have to be responsible with the how do I say it, the privileges of living. But we do have rights. And the simple truth of the matter is we all